Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Writers Chat. And this is where we like to gather together as writers, talk about all things writing for writers and by writers. And we are delighted to see you guys here, see so many of our friends in the chat room today. And those of you that take the time to watch the replay, we really, really appreciate you all being a part of our community that we have here. So thank you for participating today. And we are excited. I am joined today by Brandy and Johnnie, and Melissa's off screen right now, and then our cohorts that way. And those of you that, like I said in the chat, and I get to introduce our special guest today, and I'm excited about this. And we're going to talk about, I think, a topic that all of us face is sometimes this negative self-talk that we have, especially as writers. I think that's a very human thing too, but especially as writers, and how sometimes that really derails our writing and makes us feel like we're imposters or not worthy or can't keep going. And Molly's got a very wonderful framework for us that is going to be very practical and down to earth for us to work through. So I'm excited. So I'm going to give you her formal introduction. Then I'm going to tell you something on the side for her. Then we'll turn it over to Molly on that way. Molly is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She specializes in treating the impact of trauma and adversity. And she believes everybody experiences some degree of adversity. I think we can all agree with that, can't we? And we all also have the God-given resources for healing, and her emphasis is healing, getting through healing on that. And she focuses on helping people assess those resources that we have within us and among us on that way. She is the author of a book. Now I have it here, proud owner of it. I got to hold it just right. Restoring Relationship. Isn't that a beautiful cover? By the way, it's just a beautiful cover. We've talked about how covers could draw you as a writer, but it is a beautiful cover. Restoring Relationship, transforming fear into love through connection. I know connection's been a strong word for me this last year, so that's a lot of it. It's a great resource, so I encourage you guys to purchase that. Molly's also very active on Instagram, I think on Facebook too, but mainly I know her on Instagram. I think Melissa probably will put her Instagram connection and her website in the chat here for us, but she is a good one to follow on Instagram, so I encourage you that. And Molly has how many masters you got? It's 2 and you're working on 3rd. Is that what it is?
I am a lifetime learner. Yes, I was a hospital administrator in my first professional life, so I have a master's in public health, and then shifted to marriage and family therapy. I got my master's at a seminary as my children were launching into college. And then God led me to focus on a master's in spiritual formation, which I'm currently debating whether it ought to be a doctorate instead of a master's. So we'll see.
She just loves to learn, and you could say, because I have a master's in public health, so that's how we kind of connected. We'd also connected, by the way, because we were both in Hope Writers Mastermind last year together, and they broke us up into 3 smaller groups, and I was blessed enough to have Molly be in Molly's group on that, and we continue to meet till today over Zoom, don't we? We meet monthly over Zoom.
And we are blessed to have Jean, as you all know, our group.
We've talked before about the value of community and supporting each other, and that has been an invaluable resource, and the friendship, the wisdom that I've learned from Molly over this last couple of years have just been invaluable. So I'm so blessed to have her in our life and stuff. She lives out west. Is it Oregon or Washington? Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon, with her husband of over 40 years, and she is mini as a grandmother, mama, and I love these names that grandmas take on. So she is mini to her grandchildren, who I believe are in California, aren't they? California, are they in
Yes, San Diego? Our children and are both in San Diego with their children.
So those of you that that our grandparents can emphasize, see that. So anyway, it has an expertise in what's called, I was trying to think what the I is, family systems.
Internal family
Family
systems.
And it's a fascinating way of dealing with some of our own struggles, but I think some of our strengths too. It's a way to identify strengths. So Molly, thank you for being with us today. And I'm going to kind of turn it over to you to kind of give us a background and introduction, and then we can have some discussion on it. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here with all of you. And I'm gonna, in order for how I approach this idea of negative self-talk to make any sense at all, I need to give you a 30,000 foot view of this model that I use in my work. So please bear with me for a few minutes. It's going to feel a little bit didactic, but I hope that it spurs some great conversation. So one of the things I see, so a lot of times negative self-talk you'll see talked about as an inner critic, which primarily, as I've noticed, people love to bash. So, and I have a very different view of negative self-talk, of if you conceptualize it as an inner critic. I have a very different view. And so I'm going to orient you to this model I use in my work, which has been, since I got my master's at a seminary, I have always integrated Christian spirituality and the best of what I could learn about from science, neuroscience, psychotherapy. And so my model is integrative. So one of the best ways to understand how I conceptualize humans is by thinking of a time recently when you had to make a decision. And, something a little bit more than should I stop for gas on the way to the grocery store, but maybe deciding whether you want to start a new writing project, or maybe there was a relationship that had gotten a little distant and you were wondering whether you wanted to reach out to someone and reconnect, or there was a change you were contemplating making in your life. Oh, I need to exercise more. I just saw the doctor and gosh, I better get on it with my nutrition or something like that. So just bring something to mind and recall whether it was easy to make this significant decision. And if not, there's a lot of times we have to sort through competing perspectives. That starts to give you a clue for how busy it can get inside when there's something significant. And this busyness that's going on inside can start feeling like a conference room full of people who are jumping across the table, talking on top of each other or talking over each other. And it gets pretty chaotic. The more significant the decision, the more likely it is to provoke a variety of internal responses. And that just starts giving you a clue to this idea that I'm not just Molly, this one, no facets to the stone, if you will, that we have a lot of different facets to who we are. And sometimes people cringe when I say multiplicity, or we have multiple persons inside us, because we've pathologized that concept. We've labeled it as something to fear, something that's an illness. But in fact, we all talk about ourselves this way all the time. We often say, especially around a decision, well, a part of me wants to start this new writing project, but another part of me is afraid I won't complete it. I don't have time. And maybe there's yet another voice or two in there worried about whether you really ought to be writing this memoir thing because everybody in the family is going to get upset with you, or whatever it might be. So can anybody relate to this idea of an inner debate? Does anybody want to share an example of something you've noticed recently?
Well, I just said, I was thinking about how it gets uncomfortable, that tension inside. When you want to do something and yet you have this almost fear or doubt or conflict. It's I don't like the uncomfortableness of the tension of the conflict where I don't
like the confusion it brings.
Wow.
Because then it's hard to make decisions.
Right. Yeah.
It
Yeah, you
almost
get into this
stops you.
swirling fog of confusion and you get stuck.
I think stuck is a good word. Stuck is
Yeah.
a very good word for it on that.
Yeah, and you're making a good point, Jean, which is that what's going on inside is not just words. We feel a lot in our bodies. Emotions are bodily based experiences. So we feel these emotions in our bodies, and the sun is coming up because it's early here. So I'm going to put my blind down so I can still see you. So there's a lot going on inside, and that includes sensations in our bodies, emotions, maybe images. We might see someone's face, and we have these thoughts. There's a lot going on. And this model I use, as Jean said, is called internal family systems, which is a tip off to the fact that we conceptualize what's going on as the activity of internal family members, that what we have inside is a system. And I don't want to go off on too many tangents, but the idea that there's a system inside of us, when we think of God's creation, first of all, triune God, a system of persons in relationship. We are created in God's image. And if you look at all of creation, from subatomic matter to ecosystems, there are systems everywhere throughout creation. So why wouldn't humans created in God's image have a system inside? It really makes a lot of sense when we start thinking in terms of systems. And this model certainly is not something I developed on my own. There's a researcher named Dr. Richard Schwartz, and he has his PhD, his doctorate in marriage and family therapy. So we're trained in systems theories that look at humans in the context of their families and broader systems of which we're all a part. And he jokes that his clients didn't realize they were supposed to be improving. He's using all these things that he'd been trained to do and was doing outcome studies and not seeing the kind of change he wanted to see. And he decided to get radically curious. What a concept, right? And so he just started listening, and clients kept talking about parts of themselves. And the more he leaned into that, and the more he listened, and the more he spent time giving them voice, the more he realized, oh, well, there's a system in there. These voices I'm hearing are doing the same things that those of us who are family therapists are trained to see in families. It's all going on inside of us too. There are these people with different roles and perspectives and conflicts and alliances and all these things that we see in our external families.
So we're not crazy.
We are not crazy. No, multiplicity does not mean you are crazy. It means you're human. So welcome to being human. And one of the really, to me, most integrative things, part of the reason that I have gone all in with this model and done ridiculous amounts of training in it and wrote a book about it, is because it integrates so beautifully with Christian spirituality. And one of the radical findings of this model, again, Dick Schwartz he was raised by an atheist. His family's culturally Jewish, but not religiously Jewish. And what he discovered was that no matter what people had experienced in their lives, they all had these resources that when he talked to enough parts of them, and he'd get to things like mercy and compassion and curiosity and creativity, and he'd say, well, who's that? And they'd say, oh, well, that's just myself. And so again, no matter how much trauma they had experienced, there was this self that emerged that possessed qualities that we can clearly recognize as reflecting God's image. And so that was, that was a mind blower in the secular psychotherapy community. And it's very congruent with what we believe, which was, as image bearers, we are meant to be able to go out into the world. I recently read a biblical scholar who was saying, throughout the Hebrew Bible, there was never any question of whether people had the capacity and capability to obey God. The expectation was that people actually could do that. They got in trouble when they didn't. And I thought, well, once again, there it is again, that this idea that no matter what happens to us, we can still tap these resources. So I could go on and on about how amazing that is. But bottom line is, we have an inner family. There's a leader who has these God-given resources, and there are all these different members who bring wonderful qualities. And so that's how we come into this world. And then life
talk a little bit
happens.
about some of the members. What you
Yeah.
got a leader that has the resources,
Right.
but who are some of these other family members?
Yeah. So can I get to that? So I was about to start talking about that.
Good.
So then, but chime in if I don't answer your questions well. So because the reason I don't want to jump too quickly into talking about different family members is I want you to understand. But just briefly, Jean, here's a good analogy for these different members. If you've ever done a personality typology, the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, whatever, you've identified different members of your internal family. So we all have different skills and strengths and talents and abilities. And, any of you who are joining me in this wonderful journey of grandparenting, you see this very, very young, or parenting. I see some of you are parenting young children. You see these wonderful different aspects that represent who God created us uniquely to be in this world. But the tricky thing with our internal family is, and especially with the way humans develop, is when life happens, it forces some of these family members into different roles than they came into this world to be. So, and it's always tricky when I talk about the impact of early life experiences, because if you are parenting young children, people think, oh my gosh, but the fact is, there is no perfect parent. There is no perfect primary caregiver. And that's why adversity is universal. Now, that adversity is not necessarily a bad thing. It's simply a fact of life in a fallen world. And so, but because we do all experience things, and a lot of times the reason those early life experiences are so formative is because human brains are incredibly immature when we're born. They take practically forever to develop. It used to be like at 25, the frontal lobe's fully developed. Now they're saying 30. I mean, at some point, we're just going to realize, for one thing, the brain continues to develop. So there's this thing called neuroplasticity. So that's the good news, is it can constantly develop new neural pathways. But because we come into this world with this immature brain, we are totally dependent on those big people in our lives to help us process stuff that happens, because we can't make sense of it ourselves. We don't have the mechanism inside us. We have these resources, we have these God-given resources, but they manifest differently over the developmental lifespan. And so we have to rely on these primary caregivers to help us make sense of things. And children don't always get that support. And all of us have had experiences where that big person in our lives just they misattuned, they just didn't get it, that was a big deal to us. And so they minimized it or told us to get over it or whatever. And for all of us, our early experiences it's just a matter of degrees. Like, how often does that happen? How severe was the injury? How pervasive is this experience of not getting our needs met? The fact is, again, even little things can affect us. So an example from my life, I can never remember whether it was first or second grade, because I had the same teacher both years. So I could see the teacher, but I have no idea if I was first or second grade. But I went up to her desk, I asked permission to use the bathroom. And I see on her desk this paper full of red ink. And I remember my initial thought was, oh, I wouldn't want to be that. No, wouldn't want to be her. Well, it was me. I saw my name. So probably I was second grade anyway. And I immediately was flooded. And I ran to the bathroom and I was sobbing. And she had to come get me because I was not coming back to that classroom. I was in a shame spiral. Of course, I couldn't name it as that at the time. But at that young age, I had already internalized my father's expectation of excellence or perfection or high achievement or whatever label you want to put on it. I knew that was utterly unacceptable. And so these experiences happen to all of us. And again, if there are enough of them and they're painful enough, we start internalizing these negative beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm stupid. I'm unworthy. There are a litany of negative beliefs. And they are accompanied by often shame. They can be accompanied by terror. If we think we're unlovable, then we feel abandoned. And that terrifies us as humans. We need each other. So this cluster of distorted beliefs and negative emotions and the tension we feel in our bodies and all of these things becomes these burdens that parts of us hold. So kind of back to your question, Jean. So some of these internal family members are these often young, burdened family members. And so it would be difficult to get through life if all that happened to us was we keep having these experiences that burden parts of the family and we don't do anything about it. Well, God gave us the ability to adapt. And so what we do about it is internal family members, they give up what they were meant to do and take on a job that they think they have no choice but to do. And so we call them protectors, and we often have an army of them. And so, for instance, for me, I had a protector take on that job, and maybe it wasn't just that one incident. There were probably others. Of course, I'm getting these messages from my dad. But, my part of me was going to get the straight A's, going to, do the assignment early as perfectly as possible, because they don't want us to experience that pain. So they proactively sometimes try to manage the situation. And other times they reactively numb the pain that surfaces inevitably. So those days when you're lying on the couch, curled up in a blanket, watching Netflix, maybe that's a protective part of you that just says, we need to disconnect. Life is too hard. And so we have this adaptive ability to either try to keep the pain from ever surfacing again or numb it back down when it does. So that's kind of the internal family. We've got this leader, the self, who has these wonderful God-given qualities that cannot be obliterated. But with all of these little burdened ones and all these protectors, those resources start getting blocked or constrained. And that's why we don't just go through life flowing with this wonderful God-given energy in every situation. There still are members of your internal family who aren't either burdened or forced into protective roles. And so you probably have, you tap into your creativity as a writer, and you have other things, maybe members of your internal family who have other talents or skills. They help you show up on time, and not because there's this pressure of I'm going to be shamed if I don't, but just because, that's a good adult skill to have, show up on time, be prepared, things like that. So it is a full blend of all of these things. Let's see. All right, I'm going to open up for questions in a minute. Let me make sure I cover everything. So, I think I've covered this. Sometimes people talk, you're probably familiar with hearing people talk about your inner child. In this model, newsflash, there isn't just one of them. So often, often we talk about when other models are talking about the inner child, often they're talking about maybe the youngest one, because there are these developmental stages we go through as humans where we're really vulnerable, like 3, 4 years old. Sometimes for some people, there's been a radical shift in the family at a certain age. Either a parent dies, there's a divorce, there's a major financial setback, what we call a nodal event that just really disrupts things. And then there can be a lot of wounding that occurs at that age. So, but for most of us, there are all these things that happen over time and into adulthood. Just because we're adults doesn't mean we don't get wounded. Obviously, things can still happen. Okay. So I've kind of given you a sense. We've got these hardworking protectors. They're very well intentioned. They're very dedicated, and they're very hardworking. But the more they're active, the less we're leading the internal family, drawing on these God-given resources. And so what we're going to talk about is a practice to restore that leadership and enable you. We don't eject parts from the system. We don't send them packing. We connect with them. And as they connect with the leader of the system, they feel more relaxed about letting us lead. And they contribute their little perspectives, but they don't hijack us. Any questions so far, just on this way of understanding ourselves?
Johnnie, Brandy, any questions right off?
And if there are questions in the chat, feel free to.
There's been some sharing in the chat. I don't know if there's been and some reflection more than anything. I just say it just sounds like I'm picturing this a family dinner where everybody's talking inside, a lot of chatting going on, and the poor leader can't get a word in edgewise, and sometimes
Right.
all of this chattering going on and stuff. And I love the idea that you tell us that some of these internal family members are well-intentioned. That it's easier to accept it than to immediately go to the negative of why do I always feel this way, sort of thing. I'm failing again, that sort of thing. Instead of going immediately to that extreme, understanding that they're well-intentioned to protect us.
That's right.
It really gives you a better understanding, probably a healthier understanding.
Well, I think it gives us more of a Jesus-like understanding. So
yeah.
if you think about how does Jesus approach everybody, it's always with this openness, curiosity, compassion, validating, what they were doing. And so the starting point is meeting them where they are. And that shifts everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I want to talk about specifically how writing can, impact our internal family. And I'd like to start with an exercise, and it'll be easier since most of you aren't on camera. But even if you are, if you're comfortable doing so, it really helps to close your eyes, because as we start focusing our attention on our inner landscape, it can help to close our eyes and minimize those external distractions. And I want you to imagine sitting where you typically write. And maybe you're already there. If you're not, imagine being in that space, opening up your notebook or your laptop, whatever you use to write, and bring a current writing project to mind. Maybe there's one you've wanted to start but haven't, and you're looking at a blank page or a blank screen. That's okay too. And I want you to bring your attention to your body. Your head is part of your body. That counts. Just do a little scan and notice if being in your writing position is activating anything in your body. of any kind. Could be positive, might feel like tension. There could be an impulse even, like to jump out of the chair. And after you spend a little time focusing on your body, I want you to notice if there are thoughts. Are you hearing anything? And then notice if there's anyone in there trying to distract you. Do you wish you could just pick up your phone and scroll through Instagram? Are you thinking about your grocery list or the rest of your day? And then notice if there are emotions. What are you feeling? Could be anything from excitement to dread, anxiety. And as Jean alluded to a few minutes ago, maybe you're noticing a little bit of a tug of war, like you're hearing from opposing camps. Somebody's excited to write, another's afraid, another's distracting you. And maybe you're even hearing from your inner critic. Maybe there's some negative self-talk going on. Why bother writing? Your platform's not big enough. No publisher's going to want your manuscript. Your voice isn't unique. Your story's not compelling. So there might be a lot going on. Some of you might be blank inside, and all of that is welcome, and we'll talk more. For now, what I'd like you to do is take a breath. Maybe it helps to imagine all these characters as people around a table. And I want you to thank them for showing up. See if you can feel a little bit of gratitude as you begin to imagine that they're there for a reason, that they actually are trying to help you, or maybe they're there because they're holding some pain. But either way, see if you can just thank them and let them know you appreciate how they're trying to help. And when you're ready, we'll come back together, and I would love to hear any questions, comments.
You said, thank them for showing up. And I went, what? Internally, because it's so jarred me. It's just so different from my natural inclination, because I just keep fighting.
Mhm.
And that fighting keeps stonewalling the project.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I can't move forward. So then I thought about what you said about how these things are showing up because their intentions are good. They're trying to help.
Mhm.
And I can see that, some of the things that I think about this one particular project that I've just not been able to move forward with is, why are you doing this? You're stupid to keep trying to do this, just move on. And then another part of me was speaking up and say, but this is an interesting thing and I want to explore it. And another part was like, no, you need to be, you need to finish the things that you start, because if you abandon everything, you're never going to get anything done. So I had all these voices that kept coming up, and I did realize that, yeah, they're all trying to help. So actually I ended up just mentally saying, well, thank you for trying to help. Let's work on this together.
Oh,
And then,
Yeah.
and then, we came back and we said, so it's just, but that really like, what? Thank them. What a novel idea. Maybe they are here trying to help. And that, taking away that internal battle, maybe that right there just takes away the wall I keep hitting with this project.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That couldn't illustrate all of this more beautifully. And before we leave each other today, I'm going to give you a practice that helps you. What we're doing, the reason my book's titled Restoring Relationship is this is all about restoring the relationship between the leader of the internal family who leads in harmony with the Holy Spirit, restoring the relationship with these different parts of ourselves, because it is through relationship that we're wounded, and it is through relationship that we heal. And I believe, like, I'm going to step all up on my little podium here, but this is how we live out the great commandment. If we don't love ourselves, we're not going to love well in our relationships or with God.
So often as Christians, we hear the devil's trying to stop us, or the devil's doing this, or the devil's doing that. And I think that really puts false blame in the wrong place a lot of the time, because I think that a lot of it is like what you're saying. They are internal members and naturally trying to rise up and help. They're not trying to harm us. It's not necessarily the devil coming at us. It's that we're trying to work through a problem, and there's just so many voices that we can't move forward. And so maybe it'd be a good idea to just halt trying to blame the devil all the time for roadblocks, and start to think, maybe it's just an internal process that's natural, and I need to start paying attention and work with what's going on inside me. And everything is not the devil's fault.
That's right. That's right. And this is, I want to be mindful of our time, but one of the many things that really blew me away when I was trained in this model is that as we interact with these different parts of ourselves, we actually can discern if there is evil energy in the system. This secular scientist recognized that occurs, and we can deal with it. I've only had to do it a couple times clinically. I've watched him do it with someone who had a profound amount of evil energy, what we would think of as Satan's presence, Satan's dominions, minions in there. So even a secular scientist realized that can happen, but it's the tail end of the bell curve. Most of the time, it's the activity of these protectors who can be in rather dysfunctional roles. I mean, there are some, when we start thinking about some of the impulses humans have, but more often than not, far more often than not, it is our own protectors just getting stuck in roles that they don't think they have any choice about.
And like you said, it's all of a sudden when you stop and listen and thank them and appreciate it, you do accept them, and it becomes almost like a teamwork, like Brandy said. Let's work together type thing, a compassion. I feel more compassion for myself, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just, I'll just make some more comments and we'll keep chatting. I think it helps us really to understand why something like writing provokes this chaos inside us when we realize how vulnerable it is to send something out into the world. And fundamentally, all these protectors in our system are afraid of vulnerability. They don't want us to take risks. And writing is some of the riskiest business we can be involved with. And there is a lot of rejection in writing. We get rejected by agents and publishers and even, the comments, if you post something publicly and people comment on it and they don't like it. I mean, it's inevitable. So that's why I believe that you just imagine going to the place where you write and the protectors are like, oh, time to go to work. I better be on guard because, this could be risky. And as you're getting a sense, the goal is not to beat them up. The goal is not to eject them from the system. The goal is to connect with them. And as Jean emphasized, when we recognize they have a positive intention, and when we recognize that this is like a uniform they put on, it's not their essence. We were never meant to have an internal critic. We were never meant to have parts of us who shame us. But they're doing it because they don't think they have a choice, because they'd rather do that than have us feel pain. So rather than ignoring them, we make friends with them. This is all about connection. It's all about befriending. And one of the things you noticed, I'm sure most of you, when you went inside and just paid a little attention, is there are these warring factions. There's a lot of chaos going on inside. And especially when we talk about this inner critic, inevitably parts of the system don't like that one. They're afraid because this is kind of nasty energy that they have. They're afraid of them. They get into like, well, I can outshout you, they get going. And the noisier it gets in there, the more the distractors come in, because wow, this is really uncomfortable. Let's go eat some ice cream. I mean, let's go, like, this is too hard. And so the distractors come in, and before you know it, that hour or two you set aside for writing, you've just completely frittered away. And that's the work of the distractors. And we all need to balance work and play. So again, this isn't a bad thing. So keeping in mind that having some team members who are really hard workers, and having some that want to make sure we get out and play, this is all good. This is the benefit of a system that seeks balance. It's just they get into these extreme roles. So the one who says, I think, maybe edit that before you publish it, that's a good thing. We want an internal editor. We don't want to stick things out there that are full of typos. But if that part of us is really worried and afraid, it takes on a very different feeling inside. And that's where we get stuck. Okay, so the goal is so like with any relationship, if you're even out with a group of friends, if you're all talking at once, you can't have good conversation. So when we're trying to befriend members of our internal family, we want to do it one at a time. And because they don't show up one at a time, interestingly, we can usually just ask the rest of them to take their turn, to step back. It's really simple. Now, in certain circumstances, when there's some really egregious pain in the system, it gets more complicated. But for a lot of us, we can just say, hey, one at a time. I'm going to talk to you, and then I'm going to talk to you. Now, just as with your children, my son and daughter-in-law and their 2-year-old son were just visiting, and she's working with him because, toddlers, they like at you. So she's teaching him to say attention when he wants her attention. So the two of us are talking, and he says, attention. And we keep talking. And he says, attention. We keep talking. He says, attention. And then he said, bah! Just yelled at us. And so this is how our inner family members are. So we want to be the parent that actually, like, when they say attention, maybe it takes a couple times, but we want to like turn toward them and say, oh, okay, yeah. You need my attention. I'm going to actually listen to you. So it's our job to actually follow up on this. Anyway, so the goal is we're going to make friends with this part of us. And I want to encourage you that you know how to do relationships. You have relationships with lots of people in your life, and this is no different. It doesn't take a different skill set. What we mostly want to bring is curiosity. We might not be able to get right to compassion, especially with your inner critic, if you've never thought of them in this way. But if you can get to curiosity, that's the beginning of a relationship. And you just ask stuff like, how are you trying to help me? How long have you been doing this? What do you need from me? Because a lot of this relationship building is so that they know this leader of the system that has all these resources. Because like, I have qualities, we can do this together. Let's link arms and do this together. You don't have to do this alone. I actually have things like clarity. So we can read this thing together and know if it makes sense. How about we do it together? You know, so connecting. And it's a relationship. So you want to notice the response. Are they interested in getting to know you? Maybe not at first. That's okay. Hang out. Sometimes wordless presence, especially if you invite more of the Holy Spirit, just like, come on in, let's hang out together. Let's just be together for a minute and see what that feels like. Pay attention to your body, because so often connecting, I don't want to say always, but almost always connecting with these parts of us, will notice they calm down, because they're like those toddlers. Attention, attention, attention. I'm going to do what it takes to get your attention. But when I get your attention, I start calming down. So we have enough time. I'd like to walk you through a little exercise, picking one part of one member of your inner family, walk you through the exercise for connecting with them. Sound good? All right. Okay, so once again, helps if you're turning your attention inside, if it's comfortable for you to close your eyes. And maybe there was someone who showed up earlier in this, or in our other exercise, that you'd like to get to know better. It really helps as you start setting an intention to connect with a part, to notice if any others are worried about it. And that might be anxiousness in your body. You might be hearing, no, don't go there. Now, we want to respect a really strong pushback. It's there for a reason. But if you're sensing that you feel confident about connecting with someone, just kind of pick that easy one and ask the rest if they'd be willing to step back. And just notice how your heart is toward this part of you. Like, is it feeling spacious in your heart area? And if not, there probably is another part of you that needs your attention first. It's okay to shift to that. What I want you to do is notice a part of you that you feel like, yeah, I can be a little curious. I'm interested. And when you get to that place of curiosity, just bring your attention to how this part of you is showing up in your body. Where does it hang out? Is there a sensation or an impulse that goes with it? Maybe you get an image. Could be that you're seeing a person, might be a shape, might be a color. Notice if there are emotions that this one is holding that you're getting a sense for, or they're saying things to you. So again, the first step in a relationship is just paying attention to the other person, noticing who they are and how they show up. And as you're bringing your focus to this member of your inner family, again, I want you to check your heart. We do this a lot. Is it open? Are you still curious? And if you sense that open connection, then let's start befriending this part of you. Asking whatever questions you want to ask. Tune me out if my questions aren't resonating. But you might want to just start with, how are you trying to help me? And maybe you don't get a response, but you might get some sensation or emotion or an image. It's often useful to ask, what do you need from me? So you're trying to help me. You've been doing this job all by yourself. I'm here for you. What do you need from me? How can I help? With any relationship, we want to notice the response. So we're not here to interrogate parts of us. We're here to begin to connect. Notice if you can appreciate how they've been showing up, how they've been trying to help you. And if so, send them some love. It's tougher to do that if they don't seem like they want to connect with you, but that's okay, because we just are going to meet them where they are and accept them as they are. We're not here to make them change. We're here to get to know them. And if you sense that they're afraid that you're here to take their job away, please reassure them that is not what you're here to do. There may come a time where they want to give up that job because they decide it's no longer necessary. But today you're just showing them they're not alone. You have resources to help them. And because our time is coming to a close, I'd like you to just thank them again. And if you're interested in this relationship, let them know you'd like to connect again. And notice how they respond to that idea. And when you're ready, just shift your attention back outside.
Thank you. Thank you. Brandy, it looked like it got to you a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, what I didn't expect was to have something come up that was the part of me that says nobody takes care of me, because I'm the person that's taking care of everybody else. And I just got the sense of this little child in a corner crying. And I said, I'm sorry to myself for not acknowledging the pain of myself. And I realized that I divide myself in trying to, we can divide ourselves because we try to ignore parts of ourselves because we can't fix it, or we don't sense that there's a solution, and we just have to keep going on. but I think I realize that it's important to acknowledge these parts of ourselves because they are parts of ourselves. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And, as Christians, we may think, oh, like somebody made a comment that, we're taught that we shouldn't self-analyze or we shouldn't focus on self-help and everything. Oh, she's so sweet. She got me a tissue. And, where it's like, you're just supposed to focus on God and you're not supposed to talk to parts of yourself and all that. And I don't think that's exactly true. I've spent the majority of my life trying to ignore these parts and just focus on God. And I think it's been a disservice to myself because God did make parts of us as varying parts. I commented in the chat, I'm a child, but I'm an adult. I'm wise, but I'm also foolish. I'm smart, but I'm also dumb. I am all of these things. And to shove some parts away and embrace others, it divides me. And I have felt that division acutely, and it affects everything that I do. This is much better to be whole and recognize that these are facets of myself and try to work with parts of myself before God, with God's help, with his direction, prayerfully. One of the ways I do that is journaling, but prayerfully, it's all before God. And he allows us to realize that there are parts of ourselves and he's the one who brings healing and he brings wholeness.
Wow. Thank you for being so vulnerable, Brandy. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Those are,
It's
lovely
amazing insight.
Reflection. Yes.
It's hard to be vulnerable. We were talking, a couple people commented that it's hard to do this over Zoom because of the on that. Very hard.
Very limited. Yes.
Very limiting on that. But it's hard to go there to some of these places inside us that has really been hurtful and it's hard. That's why it was almost like, as you were saying that I had said earlier, and it sounded like a very noisy dinner table. But it was funny when you had us talk to one person, it was one-on-one, almost like in a spiritual direction mode, one chair looking to the other. But as you continue talking, I moved next to that person, next to the little girl I was talking to. And there was a physical movement of closeness, and which is a lot safer for the vulnerable person that's hurt inside.
That's right.
On that. And just to have them been heard, and it's like you said, it's not going to happen in one time. It's not going to heal in one time. Some of these. No.
And gosh, I mean, obviously when I teach this, I take days to do it, because there are these very vulnerable members of our internal family, and we need to be very respectful of the protectors who've worked really hard to keep us away from them and be gentle and patient and not try to rush to them, because parts of our system kind of hear this and they think, "Ooh, this is going to heal me. Let's go right down there and find those little ones." And we need to back up and get to know those protectors. And then when little ones surface, loving them, I'm here. You're not alone. Wow. Your needs matter.
Well, this has been powerful and just a tip of the iceberg. The internal family system and that. Johnnie, did you want to make a comment? We conclude.
Just a couple things that, even going back to the first exercise you did when because I'm kind of like that. I want to make sure I do everything right. And this is so new to me. And it's like, oh no, I'm going to mess this up. And when you said, think about your writing project, and I'm needing to write chapter 2, and I wrote chapter 1 like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So it's been this gap for different reasons. And I was like, oh no, please don't ask me to start writing chapter 2, because I hardly remember what's writing in chapter 1. And just feeling that tension just build up, in my body. And he said, now what does your body feel like? I thought, oh, well, I'm leaning forward. I'm hunched. I'm tense. It's like, no. So that's just, I think it is so important just to pay attention to your body. And then in the second exercise, a couple times when you were saying, what does your heart feel? And I believe you were meaning heart more in a metaphorical way, but both times you said it, to me, I took it very literally. And it's like, what is my heart feeling? Yeah, I'm still feeling that tension. I'm still feeling like, oh my gosh. And then so mine was very writing focused because I've got to get started on this because the deadline's coming up. And once again, I am behind, and I just promised myself I'm not going to get behind. And then things happen and I am. And I realized excitement is what I named my little one, is hiding behind these barriers and cowering in a corner is the image then that came to mind of behind responsibility, behind you've got to write this many words today and tomorrow and the next day, or you're not going to get this done. And now it's a burden and it's not a joy. So, that's sort of where I went with all of this, that I've got to allow excitement to breathe, even against the reality of, well, yes, you still have to be writing this many words every day to get it done.
Yeah.
But excitement needs to be part of that and cannot be left cowering in the corner, or else it's not going to be any fun.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's powerful. Molly, what did you do to us?
Oh, well, I found this to be very transformative in my life, and that's why I wrote a book about it.
Yep.
I was a little bit, to be clear about the book, I was in part inspired with some of the hurtful things that happen in the church when people turn for support, because if we aren't aware of these protectors in our system, they can be the ones that jump in and push people away when they're struggling, because we don't want to sit with vulnerability. And so, so I do examine some of that in the book, but it also has the full model and practices, and so that you can incorporate that.
I'll hold her book up again, and Melissa did put your website again in the chat, and we encourage you also to get to know her through Instagram. She has wonderful thoughts on Instagram, and they're beautifully done, kind of the same color, if I remember right. A lot of that is just beautifully done on stuff. So thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
And we'll probably conclude the recording, but we invite everybody to stay on for another 10-15 minutes for the after party, and maybe have some additional conversations.
Sure.
And next week, got to get into next week while we're still on the recording. Canva for beginners, isn't that still next week? I believe so.
Yes.
Norma's going to talk to us about, especially for those of us that haven't worked a lot with Canva, some basics, Canva basics and stuff. And it has changed. There's some new things to Canva just recently. So it'll be a great review for everybody next week. So it'll be totally different. We're going to become creative next week with Canva. So, and Isabel just said she loves Canva. I love Canva too. I really do on that way. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you again, Molly. Thank you. You've just given us a wonderful taste of a very loving practice for ourselves, and to help us to go know God better too, and how God has created us. So I loved how you framed it with the Christian point of view too, on that way. We put the link in the chat for Molly's book too, so you've got that. Thank you. So see you all next week on Writers Chat. Bye now.